My name is Sophia Harris, and at 34, I've built a tech empire that most people only dream of. Growing up, my family never thought I'd amount to much. My perfect sister Olivia was always the star. When my company hit it big last year, I decided to treat my family to a luxury Caribbean cruise, 8 days in premium suites, all expenses paid. It cost me $75,000, and I thought maybe they'd finally see my worth. Instead, at dinner on the second night, my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Sophia, you just don't belong in these circles. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I flipped their world upside down." I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in New York where keeping up appearances meant everything to my parents. Our house wasn't the biggest on the block, but my mother, Rebecca, made sure it looked like it could be featured in a home magazine. My father, Jonathan, worked as a financial advisor at National Bank, wearing his position like a badge of honor. At neighborhood barbecues, my mother sold real estate, specializing in exclusive properties, as she loved to tell anyone who would listen. Then there was my sister, Olivia, 2 years older, effortlessly popular, and the unmistakable favorite child. She had this golden blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, while mine was always a bit too frizzy and brown. By the time I was 7, the family dynamic was crystal clear. Olivia was the princess, I was the afterthought. "Sophia, sit up straight," my mother would say during dinner parties. "Look at your sister's posture. That's how a young lady presents herself." Even when I excelled academically, it somehow didn't matter. In 4th grade, I won the state math competition. My parents attended the ceremony, but they spent most of it talking about Olivia's upcoming ballet performance. When I showed them my trophy, my father just nodded and said, "That's nice, honey. Will this help you get into a good university?" The computer in our den became my sanctuary when I was 11. While Olivia was at cheerleading practice or student council meetings, I taught myself basic software development, creating simple games and websites. When I tried showing my mother what I'd built, she just patted my head and said, "That's nice, dear, but don't spend too much time playing on that thing. It's not very ladylike." My father was even more dismissive. "Computers are for people who can't make it in the real world," he told me once. Real success comes from knowing how to talk to people, not machines. By high school, I'd become used to the constant comparison. Olivia was class representative, captain of the sports team, and dated the team captain. I was captain of the robotics team and spent weekends coding at hackathons. My parents attended exactly 0 of my competitions. My final year, I was accepted to Stanford University with a full merit-based scholarship. The same week Olivia got accepted to Dartmouth, where our parents had both attended. Guess which accomplishment got celebrated with a family dinner at the expensive fine dining restaurant downtown? "We're so proud of both our girls," my mother announced at the dinner, raising her glass. After a pause, she added, "And Sophia got a nice grant to state, which will help with the finances." "It's Stanford, Mom," I corrected quietly. "Stanford University." My father waved his hand dismissively. "College is college. The important thing is that you're both continuing your education." That night, as we drove home, my father turned to look at me in the back seat. "You know, Sophia, we're setting aside most of our savings for Olivia's tuition. Dartmouth is very expensive, and she'll need the right clothes and connections to make the most of it. We're counting on that scholarship of yours to cover everything." I just nodded, already used to the message. Olivia was worth the investment. Stanford was like finally being able to breathe. No more living in Olivia's shadow. No more disappointed looks from my parents when I didn't meet their expectations of what a daughter should be. I called home every Sunday for the first semester, but the conversations were always the same. Brief updates from me followed by lengthy stories about Olivia's sorority adventures and social connections. By sophomore year, I'd stopped calling weekly. They barely noticed when I did. My mother would answer with surprise in her voice. "Oh, Sophia, it's been a while. Did you need something?" I threw myself into my studies, double majoring in computer science and business. While other students partied on weekends, I built websites for local businesses and started developing apps. My roommate thought I was crazy working so hard when I could be having fun. She didn't understand that creating something from nothing gave me a sense of validation I'd never gotten at home. Holidays were always a challenge. Thanksgiving meant sitting at the table, listening to my parents gush about Olivia's new boyfriend from a very good family or her internship opportunities. Christmas meant receiving practical gifts like plain sweaters, while Olivia unwrapped designer clothes and jewelry. During my junior year, my grandmother passed away. She was the only family member who had ever shown interest in my coding projects. At her funeral, my father gave a eulogy mentioning how proud she was of her granddaughters, Olivia following in the family's social footsteps, and Sophia doing her computer thing. By senior year, the emotional distance between me and my family had grown into a chasm. I graduated with honors, but my parents barely made it to the ceremony, arriving late and leaving immediately after to attend Olivia's graduation party at Yale the next day. "Sorry we can't stay, honey," my mother said, giving me a quick hug. "You understand. Olivia has so many people coming to celebrate with her." I did understand. I understood perfectly that, in their eyes, I would always be secondary. As I watched them drive away, I made a promise to myself. Someday, I would build something so successful they couldn't ignore it. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because I wanted them to recognize what they had dismissed for so long. My college graduation gift to myself was a cramped one-bedroom apartment in South Boston that I shared with my best friend, Mackenzie Taylor. We'd met during freshman orientation when we were both trying to find the computer science building. She was brilliant, fearless, and the first person who ever truly believed in my ideas. Our apartment doubled as our office. A couple of desks, shoved against the wall, multiple monitors balanced precariously on milk crates, and whiteboards covering every available inch of wall space. We lived on ramen noodles and coffee, pouring every spare dollar into server costs and development tools. "What exactly are you doing out there in Boston?" my mother asked during one of our infrequent phone calls. "Olivia's just been hired by Goldman Sachs. Starting salary is impressive." "I'm building a company, Mom," I explained, trying to keep the excitement in my voice. "We're developing a platform that helps small businesses manage their online presence more effectively." "Oh, that sounds interesting," she replied, her voice trailing off. "Is there money in websites these days? Your father knows someone at the bank who might be able to get you an entry-level position if this little project doesn't work out." My father was even more direct when I called him for advice on our first business loan application. "Sophia, be realistic. The tech industry is cutthroat, and you don't have the experience or connections to make it. Why not get a stable job? With benefits? That's the sensible path." Despite their doubts, Mackenzie and I kept pushing forward. We worked 18-hour days, survived on minimal sleep, and pitched our platform to anyone who would listen. Most doors closed in our faces, but we kept knocking. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A small cafe owner, who had reluctantly agreed to try our beta version, mentioned our platform to his brother-in-law, who happened to be a venture capitalist specializing in tech startups. One meeting led to another, and suddenly we had our first round of serious funding, $500,000 to expand our team and refine our product. When I called my parents with the news, my father's response was tepid at best. "Well, that's a stroke of luck. Just be careful not to blow through that money too quickly. These tech bubbles tend to burst, you know." My mother added, "Did you hear Olivia got promoted? Only 6 months at the firm and already moving up. They're sending her to London next month." With our funding secured, we moved to a real office space in Cambridge and hired our first employees. The platform gained traction, particularly among restaurants and retail businesses that needed an affordable digital solution. Our user base grew from dozens to hundreds, then thousands. At Thanksgiving that year, I tried once more to share my excitement with my family. "We're projecting to hit 1 million in revenue by next quarter," I mentioned as we gathered around the dining table. My father glanced up briefly from his turkey. "That's before or after expenses? Because revenue doesn't mean much if you're operating at a loss." Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Olivia just put a down payment on a condo in Manhattan, right near Central Park. Tell them about the view, dear." And just like that, the conversation shifted away from my company once again. As our business continued to grow, we decided to take a risk and relocate to San Francisco, the heart of the tech industry. The move meant better access to investors, talent, and partnership opportunities. It also meant moving even further away from my family, which honestly felt like a relief. San Francisco embraced us in ways Boston never had. Never had our platform evolved into a comprehensive digital marketing suite that attracted attention from larger companies. 2 years after our move, we closed a Series B funding round of $12 million, valuing our company at over $50 million. A feature in TechCrunch brought unexpected attention, including a rare call from my father. "Your mother saw something about your company online," he said, his voice carrying a new note of curiosity. "Sounds like you might actually be making something of this after all." The backhanded compliment stung, but I chose to focus on the positive. "We're doing really well, Dad. We have over 100 employees now and offices in San Francisco and Austin." "Well, don't let it go to your head," he cautioned. "These tech companies can collapse overnight. Have you thought about your exit strategy?" Always the vote of confidence. As our 5th year in business approached, we received an acquisition offer from one of the largest tech companies in the world. After weeks of negotiation and soul-searching, Mackenzie and I decided to decline. We believed in our vision and wanted to remain independent. That decision paid off beyond our wildest expectations. Our company continued to expand, eventually growing to over 200 employees, with a valuation exceeding $300 million. I found myself on lists of women to watch in tech and speaking at industry conferences. Success brought financial security I'd never imagined possible. I bought a beautiful house in the hills overlooking the bay, invested wisely, and even established a scholarship fund for young women in tech. But money couldn't buy the one thing I still secretly wanted: my family's genuine approval. I made attempts to bridge the gap. I sent expensive gifts for birthdays and holidays, offered to fly them out to California for visits. They always had conflicts. I donated to my father's favorite charity in his name. The response was always polite but distant. At my nephew's christening, Olivia's first child, I overheard my mother talking to her friends. "Yes, Sophia's doing quite well with her internet business. It's not quite the traditional career path we envisioned for her, but she seems happy enough. Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world like Olivia." Even with all my success, I still didn't fit their image of what a daughter should be. I wasn't married to a successful man from a good family. I didn't live in the right neighborhood or belong to the right clubs. My achievements existed in a world they didn't understand or value. As I flew back to San Francisco after that visit, I realized I was still chasing their approval like that little girl with the math trophy. It was exhausting and futile, yet some part of me couldn't quite let go of the hope that someday they would see me, really see me, and be proud. That's when I decided to make one grand gesture. If I couldn't earn their respect through my career achievements, maybe I could buy a week of their attention with the kind of luxury they did understand. A Caribbean cruise on one of the world's most exclusive ships seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally be seen as an equal in their eyes. Little did I know, that decision would change our family dynamic forever. The idea for the cruise came after our company closed a particularly successful quarter. We had just signed 3 major corporate clients, increasing our annual recurring revenue by nearly 40%. To celebrate, the executive team went out for drinks at a rooftop bar in downtown San Francisco. "You should do something crazy with that bonus," Mackenzie suggested as we clinked glasses. "All you do is work and invest. When's the last time you did something purely extravagant?" I laughed and shook my head. "I'm not really the extravagant type." "That's exactly why you should do it," she insisted. "Take a luxury vacation, buy a vintage car, do something that makes no financial sense whatsoever." Later that night, scrolling through social media in bed, I saw an advertisement for Caribbean cruises. The images of crystal blue waters, opulent suites, and exclusive ports of call caught my attention. Then I remembered my mother once mentioning that her dream vacation was a Caribbean cruise, something my father had always dismissed as too expensive. That's when it hit me. I could take my entire family on the kind of luxury vacation they'd always talked about, but never experienced. Maybe then they'd finally see me as successful on their terms. The next morning, I contacted a high-end travel agency that specialized in luxury experiences. The agent recommended Crystal Serenity's 12-day Our Caribbean voyage, one of the most prestigious cruise experiences available. When she mentioned the price for premium suites, I didn't even flinch. "I'd like to book for premium suites," I told her, And I'd like to add all the exclusive packages: private shore excursions, specialty dining, premium beverage packages, spa treatments, the works. That's quite generous, the agent remarked. Special occasion, just family bonding, I replied, already imagining my parents' reaction. The total came to just over $75,000. I transferred the funds immediately and asked for digital brochures to send to my family. That evening, I called my parents, feeling genuinely excited for the first time in years about sharing news with them. "Mom, Dad, I have a surprise," I said when they answered. "What is it, dear?" My mother replied. "We're just heading out to the Andersons' dinner party," the sound of classical music playing in the background. "I've booked our entire family on a luxury Caribbean cruise, 12 days, premium suites, all expenses paid. It's the Crystal Serenity," I said, apparently one of the most exclusive ships in the world. There was a moment of silence before my mother responded. "A cruise, all of us? That's unexpected." "It's supposed to be amazing," I continued enthusiastically. "We'll visit Rome, Santorini, Barcelona, and Monte Carlo." "Monte Carlo?" My father's voice perked up. "Well, that does sound interesting. When is this happening?" I gave them the dates, 3 months away, and waited for their reaction. "I'll need to check our calendar," my mother said cautiously. "We have the charity gala that month, and Olivia might have commitments with James and the baby." "The cruise line says it's one of their most popular voyages," I added quickly. "It typically sells out a year in advance, but I managed to get priority booking." That detail seemed to change their tone slightly. "Priority booking?" my mother repeated. "Well, I suppose we could make it work. It is a very thoughtful gesture, Sophia." My father cleared his throat. "Yes, quite generous. We'll need to shop for appropriate attire. Rebecca can't show up underdressed on a ship like that." And just like that, the conversation shifted from my gesture to their wardrobe concerns. I hung up feeling deflated but not surprised. At least they'd agreed to come. Calling Olivia went much the same way. Her first questions were about whether the ship had childcare services for her 1-year-old son, and if her husband James could bring his golf clubs. "The ship has an excellent childcare center," I assured her, "and yes, there's a golf simulator on board. Plus, James can book actual golf excursions at several ports." "Well, that's a relief," she sighed. "We wouldn't want to be bored. Is this one of those ships where we'd need formal wear for dinner? Because I need to go shopping." "Yes, there are formal nights," I replied. "The travel agent is sending detailed information packets to everyone." "I'll need to find something suitable," she mused. "James has connections at Neiman Marcus, so maybe they can help." "Oh, and will we have the same level accommodations as Mom and Dad? James is very particular about having enough space." The conversation continued like this. Not a single thank you, just questions about amenities and concerns about status. By the time we hung up, I felt like I was providing a service rather than giving a gift. Over the next few months, the demands escalated. My mother called weekly with questions about the ship's clientele. Will there be interesting people to meet? The dining options? Are they Michelin-starred? And even the thread count of the sheets in the suites. My father was concerned about the other passengers. Are they the right sort of people? And whether the cruise line offered networking opportunities with worthwhile contacts. Olivia had the most requests: a specific type of crib for her son, particular brands of baby products in their suite, dietary accommodations for James, and even questions about whether they could upgrade to a larger suite than our parents to have more room for the baby. I accommodated every request, paying for all the upgrades and special arrangements without complaint. The original $75,000 grew to nearly $90,000 with all the additions, but I told myself it would be worth it to finally be seen as their equal. 2. Weeks before departure, I flew back to Boston for a pre-cruise family dinner my parents had insisted on hosting at their country club, where they could introduce me to their friends before the trip. "Everyone's so curious about this cruise you've arranged," my mother said as we sat at the elegantly set table. "The Hamiltons are quite envious. They tried to book the same ship last year but couldn't get reservations." I smiled, feeling a small hint of satisfaction. "It's supposed to be One of the best cruise experiences available. The Serenity is acceptable, remarked my father, swirling his scotch. Though the Regent is considered slightly more exclusive in certain circles, perhaps next time you could look into that. And there it was. The subtle dig wrapped in a suggestion, implying that my extravagant gift was somehow still not quite good enough. Throughout dinner, my parents paraded me in front of their friends, introducing me as their daughter who works in computers, before quickly shifting the conversation to Olivia's husband's recent partnership at his law firm, or my nephew's apparent genius at 12 months old. As coffee was served, my father raised his cup in a mock toast to Sophia's sudden financial success. Who would have thought playing with websites could be so profitable? The table laughed, and I forced a smile, feeling like an outsider in my own family gathering. Later, as we were leaving, my mother pulled me aside. Sophia, dear, do pack some appropriate attire for the cruise. Those Silicon Valley casual clothes won't do on a ship like the Serenity. First impressions matter. I nodded silently, wondering if anything I did would ever be enough. As I took a lift back to my hotel, I questioned whether this cruise was a terrible mistake, but it was too late to turn back now. The stage was set, and in 2 weeks we'd all be together on that ship, for better or worse. Boarding day in Rome was picture perfect. Azure skies, a gentle Mediterranean breeze, and the magnificent crystal Serenity gleaming white against the horizon. I arrived at the port early, having flown in the previous day to ensure everything was perfectly arranged for my family. The VIP check-in process was seamless. The cruise staff greeted me by name, offering champagne and escorting me to a private lounge where I confirmed all the special arrangements I had made. When my family arrived an hour later, they were visibly impressed by the reception. "This is quite something," my father admitted as we were escorted onto the ship by white-gloved attendants. "They certainly know how to make an entrance." My mother was busy taking everything in, her eyes darting around to assess the other passengers. "The Carmicals cruised with Crystal last year," she whispered. "They said it was extraordinary." Olivia and James arrived last, their baby, and Nanny in tow, along with what seemed like enough luggage for a month-long journey. James immediately began questioning the staff about the golf simulator schedule, while Olivia inspected the welcome champagne before taking a sip. "European brute," she noted with approval. "Not too sweet." Our personal butler, Antonio, led us to our suites on the top deck. I'd booked 4 connecting penthouse suites with private verandas, among the most luxurious accommodations on the ship. As Antonio opened the doors, revealing spacious quarters with plush furnishings, marble bathrooms, and floor-to-ceiling ocean views, I finally saw genuine amazement in my family's eyes. "Oh my mother gasped, running her hand over the silk draperies. "This is exquisite." My father walked straight to the veranda, surveying the view with approval. "Prime location," he noted. "You can see everything from here." Olivia and James were equally impressed, though James immediately began comparing their suite to photos he'd seen of the owner's suite online. "It's just slightly smaller than the top suite," he mentioned casually, "but certainly very nice." After we settled in, Antonio informed us that a private welcome reception had been arranged in one of the ship's exclusive lounges. My family spent the next hour preparing, while I changed quickly into a simple black dress and waited for them in my suite. When they emerged, they were dressed as though attending a state dinner. My mother in an evening gown with pearls, my father in a tailored suit, Olivia in a designer dress I recognized from a recent fashion magazine. I suddenly felt underdressed in comparison. "Sophia, couldn't you have made more of an effort?" my mother whispered as we walked to the reception. First impressions set the tone for the entire cruise. At the reception, the ship's captain greeted us personally, thanking me for choosing Crystal for our family vacation. As we mingled with other VIP guests and officers, I noticed my family gradually drifting away from me, integrating themselves with the other passengers. My father was soon deep in conversation with a retired investment banker, while my mother had found a group of women wearing jewelry that met her approval. By the time dinner was announced, they had effectively formed new social circles that somehow didn't include me. We were seated at the captain's table, an honor specifically requested and paid extra for, but even there I found myself at the far end while my parents and Olivia occupied the spots nearest the captain. "Your family is delightful," remarked an elderly woman seated beside me. "Your sister was just telling us about her husband's law practice and their home in New York. You must be very proud." I smiled politely and nodded, not bothering to mention that I was the one who had made this entire experience possible. The next morning, we docked in Naples. I'd arranged a private tour of Pompeii, followed by lunch at a renowned cliffside restaurant in Sorrento. As we gathered in the ship's lobby, I noticed Olivia and James whispering to my parents. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Oh, we were just discussing whether to join your tour," Olivia explained. "James met a couple last night who invited us to join their private yacht excursion along the coast. Their driver is picking them up in 20 minutes. But I've arranged this tour specially," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "The guide is supposed to be one of the best in the region." My mother patted my arm. "It's a wonderful opportunity for Olivia and James to make connections. You understand. Why don't you go ahead with your father and me? We'll all meet for dinner." I reluctantly agreed, and we parted ways. The Pompeii tour was fascinating, but throughout the day, my father checked his watch repeatedly, and my mother seemed distracted, occasionally mentioning that the yacht Olivia was on belonged to a very influential family in banking circles. That evening, we had reservations at the ship's most exclusive restaurant. I waited with my parents at our table, but Olivia and James were nowhere to be seen. After 30 minutes, my mother received a text. "They've been invited to dine with their new friends in the owner's suite," she announced, a hint of pride in her voice. Apparently, the host is some tech magnate who's quite interested in James's legal expertise. My father nodded approvingly. "Smart move. That's how you build valuable connections." They proceeded to discuss the networking opportunity at length, completely oblivious to the fact that I, also a tech executive, was sitting right there, having been effectively ditched by my sister for better company. The pattern continued over the next 2 days. My family would accept the lavish accommodations and experiences I had paid for, then find ways to separate themselves from me when more prestigious opportunities arose. They began spending time with a group of wealthy passengers who had taken a shine to them, often forgetting to include me in their plans. On the 4th night, I found myself alone at dinner, having been informed last minute that my family had accepted an invitation to a private cocktail party hosted by a European aristocrat. They'd met earlier that day. Antonio, my butler, approached the table with concern. "Miss Harris, would you prefer to dine in your suite this evening? I could arrange a special menu." I shook my head. "No thank you, Antonio. I'm fine here." As I picked up my food, I overheard conversations from nearby tables. To my shock, I recognized my father's name mentioned by a couple seated a few tables away. "Jonathan was telling us about his banking career," the man was saying. "Quite impressive." He mentioned his daughter Olivia worked in finance as well, following in his footsteps. "Yes," his companion replied, though he said his other daughter does something with computers. Seems she got lucky with some app or website. New money? You know how it is." I froze, my fork suspended midair. My father had been discussing me with strangers, dismissing my hard-earned success as mere luck while elevating Olivia's more respectable career. The next morning, I ran into my mother by the pool. She was with a group of women she'd befriended, all draped in designer resort wear and expensive jewelry. "Sophia, there you are," she said, waving me over. "Ladies, this is my younger daughter." One of the women smiled condescendingly. "Your mother was just telling us about your little tech company. How fascinating. My son tried doing something with websites too, but he eventually went into proper finance. So much more stable." My mother laughed lightly. "Well, Sophia has always marched to her own drummer, but she's done well enough to treat us to this lovely cruise, haven't you, dear?" The way she said it made it sound like I'd won the lottery, rather than built a multi-million-dollar company. Years of hard work and determination. That evening was the captain's formal dinner, the most prestigious event of the cruise. I'd spent a small fortune on a designer gown for the occasion, hoping to finally fit the image my family seemed to value so much. We gathered at our table near the captain's seat, my family already engaged in animated conversation with the other guests. I took my place quietly, trying to join the discussion about European politics. "I'm not sure I agree with that assessment of the EU's position," I ventured during a brief lull. My father gave me a sharp look. Sophia, these matters are quite complex. Perhaps we should stick to topics we understand. The table fell awkwardly silent. Then, as if to salvage the moment, my father turned to the captain and said the words that would finally break me. Captain, we're so grateful to be experiencing your magnificent ship. Though I must admit, it sometimes feels strange having Sophia here with us. Despite her recent financial success, she doesn't really belong in these circles like the rest of us do. Different worlds, you understand? The captain looked uncomfortable, but my family didn't seem to notice anything wrong with what my father had said. My mother nodded in agreement, while Olivia gave me a pitying smile. In that moment, something inside me shattered. After all I had achieved, after the $90,000 I had spent on this trip, after decades of trying to earn their approval, my father had publicly declared that I didn't belong, not just on the ship, but in their world. I excused myself quietly and walked out of the dining room, feeling the weight of years of rejection crushing down on me. As I stood on the deck, watching the moonlight shimmer across the Mediterranean, I finally accepted a painful truth. Nothing I ever did would be enough for them. No amount of success, money, or generosity would ever make me truly belong in their eyes. And for the first time, I wondered why I still wanted to. I returned to my suite with tears streaming down my face, something I hadn't allowed myself in years. Closing the door behind me, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the plush sofa, staring out at the vast darkness of the Mediterranean through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The words kept echoing in my head. She doesn't really belong in these circles like the rest of us do. After everything, the years of hard work, the company I'd built from nothing, the extravagant cruise I was funding, I was still the outsider. Still not good enough. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Where did you go? Mom says you're being dramatic again." I didn't respond. Instead, I called the one person who had always seen my worth. "Mackenzie, it's me," I said when she answered, my voice breaking slightly. "Sophia, what's wrong?" She asked, instantly alert despite being woken up. For the next 20 minutes, I poured out everything: my family's behavior since boarding, their social climbing at my expense, and finally my father's humiliating declaration at dinner. He said that in front of everyone. Mackenzie's voice radiated indignation. "After you dropped nearly $100,000 on this trip for them? That's beyond ungrateful. It's cruel." "I don't know why I keep setting myself up for this," I admitted, wiping away tears. "It's like I'm still that little girl desperately seeking approval that's never going to come." "Because you're a good person who wants to believe people can change," she said gently. "But Sophia, listen to me. You're the CEO of a $300 million company. You've created jobs for hundreds of people. You've built something incredible through sheer talent and determination. You don't need their validation anymore." Her words hung in the air as I watched the moonlight dancing on the water outside. "You know what the worst part is?" I said finally. "They're happily enjoying all the luxury I'm providing while simultaneously making me feel like I don't deserve to be here with them." "So what are you going to do about it?" Mackenzie asked, her voice challenging, the same tone she used when pushing me to make tough business decisions. "What can I do? We're in the middle of the Mediterranean. I can't exactly leave." "No, but you can stop letting them walk all over you," she insisted. "You have the power here, Sophia. Literally, you're the one paying for everything. Maybe it's time they understood that." After we hung up, I sat on the veranda of my suite, watching the stars and contemplating Mackenzie's words. She was right. For my entire life, I'd given my family power over my self-worth. I'd worked harder, achieved more, spent excessively, all in pursuit of approval that was never going to come. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, I made a decision. I wasn't going to leave the cruise, but I wasn't going to continue being the invisible benefactor either. Something had to change. I was still sitting there when Antonio arrived with my morning coffee. "Good morning, Ms. Harris. I hope you're feeling better today," he said, diplomatically setting down the silver tray. "Antonio," I asked, "how difficult would it be to make changes to our suite arrangements mid-cruise?" He hesitated, clearly surprised by the question. "It depends on the nature of the changes, Ms. Harris. The ship is fully booked, but as the primary account holder who arranged this journey, you do have certain privileges." "What if I wanted To move my family to different accommodations? I asked. That could potentially be arranged, depending on availability, he replied carefully. May I ask what you have in mind? I took a deep breath. I'd like to explore all options. Could you ask the cruise director if I could meet with them privately this morning? Of course, Miss Harris. I'll arrange it immediately. As Antonio left, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time since boarding, I wasn't anxious about my family's approval. Instead, I was contemplating what it would feel like to stand up for myself. An hour later, I met with Isabella, the cruise director, in her office. She was a poised Italian woman with a perfect professional smile that revealed nothing. Miss Harris, Antonio mentioned you were interested in discussing some changes to your family's accommodations, she began. Yes, I replied, sitting up straighter. I'd like to understand what's available in terms of both upgrades and alternative options. Her eyebrow raised slightly at my emphasis. Alternative options? Yes, I said. My family is currently in penthouse suites, but I'm wondering if there are standard cabins available on lower decks. Understanding dawned in her eyes. I see. This would be for my parents and my sister's family? I nodded. And I'd be interested in knowing if the owner's suite is available for the remainder of the cruise. Isabella consulted her tablet, her expression carefully neutral. As it happens, our owner's suite will be vacated this afternoon in Santorini. The current guests are disembarking for the remainder of their journey in Athens. She looked up. It's substantially more expensive than the penthouse suites. However, money isn't the issue, I replied. And the standard cabins? I asked. We do have several available on Deck 7, she confirmed. They're comfortable but considerably more modest than your current accommodations. Could you show me both options? I asked. And I'd like to understand the logistics of moving guests mid-cruise. For the next hour, Isabella showed me the massive owner suite with its expansive living area, private hot tub and butler service, as well as the standard cabins with their functional but basic amenities. The contrast was striking. Exactly what I needed if I were to make these changes. I asked, when could it happen? We could prepare the owner's suite immediately after the current guests disembark at 2 p.m., she explained. The standard cabins are already available. We would need about an hour to move belongings, assuming your family members aren't present during the transition. I thought for a moment. My family is scheduled for a shore excursion in Santorini today from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m., I said. I opted out, claiming I needed to catch up on work. Isabella nodded understandingly. That would be an ideal window for the transition, should you decide to proceed. As we walked back to her office to discuss the financial details, I asked one final question. From a policy perspective, as the person who booked and paid for this entire journey, do I have the authority to make these changes without requiring additional approval from my family members? Isabella's professional facade cracked slightly, as she suppressed what might have been a smile. Ms. Harris, as the primary account holder who has paid in full for this voyage, you have complete authority over all arrangements. While we generally strive for consensus among traveling parties, your name is on the agreement, and the decision is entirely yours. Back in my suite, I sat at the desk and stared at the authorization form Isabella had prepared. All it needed was my signature to set everything in motion. Part of me wondered if this was petty or vindictive. Was I stooping to their level? But then I remembered my father's words. She doesn't really belong in these circles like the rest of us do. He was right in a way. I didn't belong in their world of appearances, social climbing, and conditional acceptance. I had built something different, something real. With sudden clarity, I signed the form and called Antonio to deliver it to Isabella. The die was cast. In a few hours, my family would discover exactly whose circle they had been traveling in all along. I spent the rest of the morning in my suite, answering emails and taking a few business calls to distract myself from the bold move I'd just initiated. At precisely 10:15 a.m., I received confirmation from Antonio that my family had departed for their Santorini excursion, blissfully unaware of what awaited them upon their return. At noon, a discreet knock at my door announced the arrival of Isabella, with 2 members of the ship's guest services team. "We're ready to begin the transition whenever you give the word, Miss Harris," she informed me, The owner suite has been vacated and is being prepared as we speak. I took a deep breath. Let's proceed. For the next 2 hours, I watched as a carefully choreographed operation unfolded. A team of staff efficiently packed my family's belongings, meticulously labeling everything to ensure nothing would be lost or damaged in the transfer. Their designer clothes, expensive toiletries, and electronic devices were carefully wrapped and transported to the standard cabins on Deck 7. Meanwhile, my own possessions were being moved to the owner's suite, a stunning 1,345-square-foot palace of luxury with a separate dining area, expansive living room, private veranda with a hot tub and a master bedroom larger than my first apartment. The suite came with expanded butler service, priority access to all ship amenities, and a level of opulence that exceeded even the penthouse suites by a considerable margin. The transition is complete, Miss Harris, Isabella informed me at 2:30 p.m. Your family's keycards have been reprogrammed to access their new accommodations. They'll be directed to the guest relations desk upon their return from the excursion. Thank you, Isabella. I appreciate your discretion in handling this matter, I said, my tone composed. She gave me a knowing smile. Of course, Miss Harris. Will you be joining your family when they return, or would you prefer we handle the explanation? I considered this carefully. Part of me wanted to avoid the confrontation entirely, but I knew I needed to face this moment head-on. I'll meet them in the main lobby when they return, I decided, but I'd appreciate it if you or a member of your team could be present to confirm the arrangements are in order. I'll be there personally, she assured me. At 3:45 p.m., I made my way to the ship's grand lobby, positioned myself in one of the elegant armchairs with a clear view of the entrance, and waited. My heart was pounding, but for once, it wasn't from anxiety about their approval. It was from the anticipation of finally standing my ground. At precisely 4:10 p.m., my family entered the lobby, looking sunburned and content from their day exploring Santorini's whitewashed villages. My father was the first to spot me, raising his hand in a casual greeting. There you are, Sophia. You missed quite the excursion, he remarked. The guide was extraordinarily knowledgeable. Apparently he works exclusively with European royalty when they visit. How fascinating, I replied evenly. Did you enjoy the views? Mother agreed. Breathtaking. Though the heat was nearly unbearable. I'm looking forward to a cool shower and perhaps a nap before dinner. About that? I began, just as one of the reception staff approached our group. Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, Miss Olivia, and Mr. James, I have your new key cards ready at the desk. If you could please follow me. My father frowned in confusion. New key cards? There must be some mistake. We already have our keys. No mistake, sir, the staff member replied smoothly. There's been a change in your accommodations. If you'll please come to the desk, we can explain. Everything. My family turned to me in unison, confusion evident on their faces. Sophia, what's going on? My mother demanded. I stood up, straightening my shoulders. I've made some changes to our arrangements for the remainder of the cruise. What kind of changes? My father asked, his voice dropping an octave, the tone he used when he was trying to maintain control of a situation. Your belongings have been moved to new cabins on Deck 7, I explained calmly. They're standard. Accommodations, comfortable, but not the penthouse suites you've been enjoying. Olivia gasped. You did what? Why would you? Because I decided that since I'm paying for this entire cruise, I should be the one enjoying the premium accommodations. I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. In fact, I've upgraded myself to the owner suite. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. This is outrageous. You can't just move our things without permission. Isabella chose that moment to step forward. Actually, Mr. Harris, as the primary account holder who paid for this voyage, Sophia has full authority to modify any arrangements as she sees fit. I can assure you that your belongings have been moved with the utmost care. I don't understand, my mother said, looking genuinely baffled. Why would you do this, Sophia? I took a deep breath. Last night at dinner, Dad made it very clear that, despite paying for this entire experience, I don't belong in these circles like the rest of you do. I've been thinking about that statement all night, and I've decided he's right. I turned to face my father directly. I don't belong in circles where people are valued based on appearances rather than character. I don't belong in circles where genuine accomplishment is dismissed as luck, and I certainly don't belong in circles where family members who claim to love me can't even acknowledge my worth. The lobby had gone quiet, with nearby passengers pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. "You're being ridiculous," Olivia hissed. "This is so embarrassing." "No, what's embarrassing," I replied, "is spending my entire life trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it. What's embarrassing is dropping $90,000 on a luxury cruise for my family, only to be treated like an unwelcome tag-along." James stepped forward, ever the lawyer. "There must be some misunderstanding. Surely we can discuss this like adults." "We're past discussion," I interrupted. "For 4 days, I've watched all of you enjoy every luxury this ship has to offer, luxuries I paid for, while simultaneously making me feel like I don't deserve to be here with you. That ends now." My father's anger had transformed into calculation. "Now, Sophia, don't be hasty. Perhaps your mother and I expressed ourselves poorly. Of course, we appreciate this trip." "No, Dad," I cut in. "You expressed yourself perfectly clearly. And for once, I actually agree with you. I don't belong in your circles. I've built my own. And in my circles, we value people for their character, not their connections. We celebrate authentic achievement rather than inherited status, and we certainly don't belittle family members to make ourselves feel important." My mother's eyes darted around nervously, clearly mortified by the public nature of this confrontation. "Sophia, please. People are watching." "Yes, they are," I acknowledged. "Just like people were watching last night when Dad announced to the entire table that I don't belong here. The difference is today I'm standing up for myself." I turned to Isabella. "Would you please show my family to their new accommodations? I believe they'll find everything they need, though. The amenities are certainly more modest." Isabella nodded professionally. "Of course, Miss Harris. If you'll follow me, please," she said to my stunned family. My father made one last attempt. "This is utterly unacceptable. I demand to speak to the captain." "The captain is actually quite fond of Miss Harris," Isabella interjected smoothly. "He specifically asked me to extend his personal invitation for her to join him at his private table for the remainder of the voyage, an honor typically reserved for our owner's suite guests." The final blow landed visibly. My family stood frozen. The power dynamic between us had irrevocably shifted. "Your new cabins are quite comfortable," I assured them, softening my tone slightly. "They're actually the same category I was originally planning to book before I decided to splurge on the penthouse suites for everyone. The ship has excellent dining options available to all passengers, and all the shore excursions I prearranged will continue as scheduled." I paused, then added, "I'm still your daughter and sister. That hasn't changed. What's changed is that I'm no longer seeking approval. I'm never going to get it. Enjoy the rest of the cruise." With that, I turned and walked toward the elevator that would take me to my new suite, leaving my family standing in shocked silence with their new key cards in hand. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished brass, shoulders back, head high, standing in my own power for perhaps the first time in my life. The strangest part? I didn't feel vindictive or triumphant. I just felt free. The next morning, I woke in the owner's suite to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the gentle sound of waves against the ship. For a moment, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Had I crossed a line, damaged my family relationships beyond repair? Then I remembered the constant dismissal, the years of seeking approval that never came, and my father's cutting words at dinner. No, I hadn't crossed a line. I'd finally drawn one. I decided to give my family space that day, dining in my suite and working remotely instead of venturing to the public areas where I might encounter them. Around midday, there was a gentle knock at my door. To my surprise, it was my mother, looking somewhat out of place in the grand corridor leading to the owner's suite. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. I gestured her into the expansive living area, Her eyes widened as she took in the luxury surrounding us, the private dining room, the enormous veranda, the fresh flowers, and champagne. "This is quite something," she said, running her hand along the back of a silk-upholstered chair. "It is," I agreed, not offering more. She sat down primly on the edge of the sofa. "Your father is furious, you know." "I imagine he is," I replied. He wanted to disembark at the next port and fly home, but the cancellation fees would be substantial. I couldn't help but smile slightly. Yes, they would be. A long silence stretched between us before my mother finally spoke again. "I've never seen you do anything like this before, Sophia," she said softly. "You've always been so accommodating." "That's one word for it," I replied. "Desperate for approval would be another." My mother flinched slightly but didn't deny it. Instead, she looked around the suite again, then back at me, with new eyes. "You really have done well for yourself, haven't you?" she said softly. "I don't think I ever properly understood what you built." "You never asked," I pointed out. She nodded slowly. "No, I suppose we didn't. Computers and technology, they weren't part of our world. Olivia followed a path we understood. You created something entirely new." "That doesn't make it less valid or successful," I said. "No, it doesn't." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her linen pants. "I keep thinking about what you said yesterday about seeking approval you were never going to get. Have we really been so terrible?" The question hung in the air between us. I could have listed every slight, every dismissal, every time they'd made me feel less than. Instead, I simply said, "You've never seen me, Mom. Not really. You've seen who you wished I was, who you expected me to be, but never who I actually am." Tears welled in her eyes, something I'd rarely witnessed in my perfectly composed mother. "I don't know how to fix this, Sophia." "It's not about fixing," I replied. "It's about recognizing that I'm not just the afterthought daughter who took a different path. I'm a successful woman who built something valuable through hard work and vision. I deserve respect, not condescension." She nodded slowly. "I see that now. Perhaps too late, but I do see it." After my mother left, I felt a strange sense of peace. Our conversation hadn't resolved everything, but for perhaps the first time, she had actually listened to me. That evening, I decided to dine in the main restaurant rather than hiding in my suite. As I entered, I noticed my family seated at a table across the room. After a moment's hesitation, I walked over. "Good evening," I said calmly. My father barely acknowledged me, staring stonily at his menu. Olivia looked uncomfortable while James seemed uncertain how to react. It was my mother who surprised me by standing up. "Sophia, would you care to join us?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair. My father's head snapped up. "Rebecca? Jonathan?" She cut him off firmly. "Our daughter is offering an olive branch. The least we can do is accept it." The tension at the table was palpable as I took my seat. We ordered an awkward silence, making stilted small talk about the ship and the ports we'd visited. Just as our appetizers arrived, Olivia suddenly blurted out, "I'm sorry." We all turned to look at her in surprise. "I'm sorry," she repeated, looking directly at me. "I've been thinking about everything you said yesterday, and you're right. We've been awful. I've been awful." My father made a disapproving noise, but Olivia continued. "No, Dad, we have. Sophia paid for this entire amazing vacation, and we've treated her like she's still the awkward teenager who didn't fit in. It's not right." James nodded in agreement. "The standard cabins you moved us to, they're actually perfectly nice. Better than most cruises offer as their best option. It made me realize how entitled we've been about this whole trip." My father remained silent, jaw clenched, but there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Uncertainty. For perhaps the first time, he wasn't in control of the narrative. The remainder of the cruise unfolded with a new dynamic. My father maintained a cool distance, though I occasionally caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. My mother made genuine efforts to connect, asking questions about my company and actually listening to the answers. Olivia and I had several long conversations, beginning to rebuild a sisterly relationship that had never really existed before. On our final night aboard, the captain hosted a farewell gala. I wore a simple but elegant black gown and entered the ballroom alone. To my surprise, my father approached me at the champagne reception. "That was quite a power move you made," he said without preamble. "I learned from watching you all." "These years," I replied evenly. He nodded, a reluctant respect in his eyes. "You're not the daughter I expected to have." "No, I'm not," I agreed. "I'm the daughter who built something from nothing, instead of following a predetermined path. I'm the daughter who values substance over appearance. I'm the daughter who finally stopped seeking approval and started demanding respect." He was silent for a long moment before saying, "I've spent my life believing success looked a certain way, followed certain rules. Your way of succeeding, it didn't fit my understanding." It wasn't an apology, but for my father, it was an unprecedented acknowledgement. I decided to accept it for what it was. "The world has changed, Dad. There are many paths to success now. Mine just happens to involve technology instead of banking." He nodded slowly. "Your mother tells me your company is valued at over $300 million. That's significant." I couldn't help but smile. Of course, he would focus on the valuation. It was a metric he understood. "Yes, it is. Perhaps when we return home, you could tell me more about what you actually do?" he suggested stiffly. It was a small opening, but it was something. "I'd like that," I replied. As the ship docked in Barcelona the next morning, concluding our journey, we gathered one last time in the lobby to disembark. The family that stood there was fundamentally changed from the one that had boarded in Rome 12 days earlier. "Thank you for this experience, Sophia," my mother said, embracing me with genuine warmth. "Not just for the cruise itself, but for waking us up, I suppose." Olivia hugged me next. "We should get together when we're back home. Really talk, you know. Maybe you could meet my son properly. He's going to need a strong aunt to look up to." Even James shook my hand with newfound respect. "Your business acumen is impressive. If you ever need legal counsel for a company, I'd be happy to recommend some colleagues who specialize in tech." My father was the last to approach. He extended his hand formally, then surprised me by pulling me into an awkward but sincere hug. "You've built something remarkable, Sophia," he said quietly. "Not just your company, but yourself. I may not always understand your world, but I can respect what you've accomplished." 6 months later, I hosted Thanksgiving at my San Francisco home, the first family holiday ever held on my territory. My mother helped in the kitchen, asking questions about my life and friends. Olivia brought her son, now a toddler, who took an immediate liking to his Aunt Sophia. Even my father made an effort, awkwardly asking about my recent business expansion to Europe. The old pattern still emerged occasionally, a dismissive comment here, a comparison to Olivia there, but now I addressed them directly instead of silently, accepting it. Slowly, painfully, we were building a new kind of relationship, based on who we actually were, rather than who they had expected me to be. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on my terrace overlooking the Bay Bridge, reflecting on how much had changed since that fateful cruise. The Mediterranean confrontation hadn't magically fixed decades of family dynamics, but it had broken a pattern that needed breaking. For the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval. I was offering them the chance to be part of my life, on mutual terms of respect. I realized that the most valuable lesson from the cruise wasn't about standing up to my family. It was about standing up for myself, recognizing my own worth instead of waiting for others to validate it. Sometimes, you have to turn someone's world upside down to help everyone find solid ground. The journey to belonging isn't about fitting into someone else's circle. It's about creating your own circle where you already belong exactly as you are, and then inviting others to join you there, if they're willing to see and respect you for who you truly are. I'd love to know if any of you have had similar experiences with family who couldn't see your worth until you showed them your power. Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family we build through friendship and mutual respect is as important as the one we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, And may you find the courage to stand in your own power, whatever that looks like for you.